When episode 3 starts, we're met with a short memory of the strained brotherhood dynamic between Sean and Daniel back in Seattle. Life seemed so simple back then, and Sean's concerns feel trivial in comparison to now, given how far we've come. But it's worth it, if only to get a brief glimpse of what we left behind. Daniel sneaks into Sean's room to steal a watch, and Sean chases him out. In hindsight, it's almost painful to witness him getting angry over something so small. After all, the brothers have far bigger problems now. Nevertheless, they have a brief fight until Esteban steps in to remind Sean of his responsibilities as an older brother. It feels like a fever dream. The boys share a sweet moment of making up during which Sean gives Daniel the watch. The brothers hug. It feels good to witness their bond. It feels good to look back at a time when all could so easily be made right again with a simple hug. The bonds you forged as brothers can never truly be broken, right? Sean wakes up to a dog licking his foot, and suddenly we're transported to the inside of a tent at a camp in Humboldt, California. He looks over to see the watch he gave to Daniel discarded like a deadweight trinket among their rucksacks of supplies. Upon exiting into the morning sun, the contrast is jarring from where we left off. Sean has longer hair. His clothes are dirtier than they've ever been, sewn up in a patchwork of threaded memories, and we're faced with yet another beautiful location set in the midst of a quiet redwood forest. Something about it immediately feels like a home away from home, as if the boys had truly gone on that camping trip without their father Sean spoke of in the first episode. The many drifters, too, feel like coming home to a family we've never known. All seems well, and it would be relaxing were it not for the absence of Daniel. Sean pours himself a coffee and briefly plops down to mingle with Penny and Ingrid, two of his fellow co-workers on the part farm situated not far from the camp. Sean's panic soon takes hold. I saw Daniel headed down to the lake with Finn, Penny reassures him, and off we go. As Sean catches up with his brother, we witness Daniel for the first time hurling knives at a tree, having befriended their leader Finn. Again, the contrast between now and when we last saw him in episode 2 is nothing short of striking. Long charcoal locks brush past his eyes, softening his boyish features to near androgyny, while his clothes are just as rugged as Sean's. But sweet and innocent, Daniel is not. He's far away from home, and even farther removed from the person he once was. So, for that matter, is Sean. The conflict between the brothers in this episode has clearly reached a tipping point. Many new players are often confused at first with Daniel's sudden change in behavior. It doesn't make sense at all, and yet somehow it should make perfect sense considering how far they are in their journey. Where and when did everything go so wrong? At the beginning, obviously, but also somewhere along the way, perhaps in something you missed, something you overlooked. It begins to nag at you, like endless nights spent in the moonlit redwood forest getting eaten alive by mosquitoes as the glow of a bonfire warmed your face. Then there's that watch, that pesky, shiny little blue and orange object. Something is missing. Maybe you should ask Daniel about the watch that once clung to his tiny, delicate little wrist. The watch that clung. But it's too late to think about that now. You've got work to do. And so you head off for a grueling day of work at the pot farm with the others drifters, even though in the back of your mind, something about all of this feels wrong. Foreign. Strange. As alien as you among the scrappy band of hippies, and perhaps more alien than you'll feel once you reach the sandy shores of Puerto Lobos. But that's still a far way off. For a while, you watch Daniel snipping away at bud after sticky bud. You get careless. The scissors slice your finger several times, but you keep going because if you don't, that skinhead thug in the corner will tear your limbs off, and somehow that'd feel worse than your brother's rejection. The girls take jab after jab at each other. Next to you is Cassidy's sweet, soothing voice, and across the table is Hannah, firing off pointed remarks. You join in the conversation to appear friendly with your coworkers, but it all just sounds like background noise compared to that terrible itch at the back of your skull. You power through it and eventually finish up, but that itch is still there, clinging to you like all the dirt and grime and dust and sweat and weed particles, and maybe the wind in your hair on the drive back to the camp. You wait for everyone else to leave the truck because Finn's always a good one to lend an ear, and the only one who seems able to calm that raging storm in your mind before it reaches the shores of insanity, or Arcadia Bay. And on the walk back, as the two of you talk further, your every footstep crunching pine needles and leaves up the breezy, winding path, it finally comes to you, straight from the mouth of your zen-minded, dreadlocked hippie leader. The more you try to control him, the less you have. It's deep, right? You probably heard this before on the drive to work that morning, but even that you overlooked. The more you get clingy, the more people tend to run away. I know what I'm talking about. Of course. How could you not see that before? The contrast, the conflict, your brotherhood and all of its rules. It's only good for so long, only good for so many situations before it explodes in your face like the faraway house you left in Seattle on Lewis Avenue. Brody's voice haunts you too. He needs you, and you need him. The divide between Sean and Daniel is what drives episode 3, challenging each brother up to their breaking point. Up until now, it's only ever been them against the world, and now you're dealing with yet more outsiders they must learn to trust. Outsiders who haven't a clue about Daniel's power and what he can do. For better or worse, this is your family now. But suddenly, it doesn't feel so much like home. It feels like a trap. And as much as you're united with the other drifters and living apart from society, your brotherhood with Daniel is left in utter decay. The little child he once was is barely recognizable. The road has taken its harshest toll on him, and up until now, you've been content to ignore that fact and all of his childish little idiosyncrasies that irritate you, all for the sake of blending in. But that's been a mistake, because the uncomfortable truth is, this is yet another microcosm of wider society. One that's different, yes, and even safer, but one you must still learn the rules of and function accordingly in, lest you be cast out. And as you go about your chores, it seems as if Daniel's power is now the biggest threat looming on the horizon of your freedom. And a desperate appeal, you spend time at the lake together to train him. But something feels off. It's not the same as it used to be. Maybe he doesn't even howl with you anymore, and that hurts. And despite all the training exercises you offer, you find Daniel has already mastered each and every one with eerie precision. It unsettles you, even scares you. He blows a hole in a nearby tree. I've been training on my own sometimes. Ouch. It hurts. And his words sting all the more when he speaks them more pointedly. Every single one feels like a personal attack. A literal bite like the snap of a wolf's jaws, the force of their weight tearing into you, right down to the marrow of your very bones. Then he gets angry. He lifts the tree trunk out of the water, a once impossible feat for him. He could hardly lift the rocks back in Willamette National Forest, and now this? What's next? He could snap your neck like a twig in your sleep. All you can do is look on in terror at the grand spectacle, and he leaves you with one painful utterance as he walks away. I'm not a kid anymore. And whose fault is that, you wonder? Am I a bad brother? You begin to question every last decision you've ever made. Suddenly, getting to Puerto Lobos no longer matters at this moment. Not when it's affected Daniel this much. Not when he's turning into a monster. Not when you've got that rabid wolf cub snapping at your heels, the pesky little ankle biter, the angsty emo child, the irritating little enano. Stop calling me that. I hate it. But all you can do is watch in open-mouthed horror as that tree trunk continuously drops on your skull again and again, turning your brain into mush. You feel stupid. You feel hot. You feel sticky even in the cool January air. Everything is a mess, and it's all your fault. Still, you lumber your way back to the camp, where the drifters have lit up a nice, warm bonfire. Cassidy plays her guitar and sings a lilting song as Daniel takes his place beside you as if nothing happened. It's a beautiful human moment full of emotional honesty, validation, and connection. And as you quietly listen to everyone else's stories, you feel closer to them, but somehow farther away from your brother than you've ever been, and so far from home. You recall a bit of your mother's mournful poem about leaving home, and deep in your heart, you consider leaving the camp. When I hide in my heart, hearing that sound that makes me feel older than the forest, older than you, but younger than the crying river at my feet. Maybe there's still some magic left in the air left behind from Cassidy's song, the stories, and the honest things you shared with your newfound family. Maybe something about it all touched Daniel, too. "Hey, I'm a little bee. You ready for bed yet?" You agree, and you have to because you need to clear the thickening air. And just this once, it feels good to go back to your own comfortable tent with your own comfortable rules, to be free of putting on a brave face for your new society, if only for tonight. It feels good to spend time with your brother again, after all this time. It feels good to come home. It feels good to tell the story of the Wolf Brothers. And it is in this tent that Daniel finally comes clean. "I know I'm not always nice with you," he says, "but things aren't nice anymore. I miss having a home, Sean. I miss my bed, my playbox, my friends, everything." Then he reaches for the watch, holding it in his delicate grasp as if it were a fragile ancient artifact from 1,000 years ago. It certainly feels like 1,000 years ago. You've lived several lifetimes in just a few short months, and it shows in each of you. "You know, I still like it, but it's kinda tight on me now." "Yeah," you reply. "You're too big for it." "I am, but I would like to hear about the Wolf Brothers again, if that's okay. Just don't tell the others." And with that, you begin your story as Daniel curls up beside you, content to have weathered yet another day in the storm together. But even more than that, you're glad to have returned to your metaphorical den of wolves. It's been forever since you were able to. It's the only place in your mind you feel safe. And telling the story always feels like coming home, no matter how many times you share it. It feels like all the things you left behind. It feels like gooey Choco Crisps that melt in your mouth. It smells like your father's pasta recipes and the smell of engine oil on his mechanic's uniform. Freshly cut lawns and barbecue weekends. Back when everything was simple, safe, sound, and unchanging. Daniel will always be safe there, you remind yourself with a smile. He's just an arm's reach away, and he always will be. Sleep tight, little cub. The next morning opens with a beautiful montage of scenes to show the passage of time, set to the Justice song DANCE. A happy, joyful dance tune, and yet something about it feels unsettling, because it recalls that time back in the motel of the first episode where Daniel dances carefree on the bed. You know something terrible is about to happen soon, but you don't know what. You know there's something more you need to have a conversation about, though you can't place a finger on it. It feels off. As Sean and the rest of the group are set to be paid, both boys break from the moment of calm they shared together the previous night. There's no fighting it. The storm is back again, and with a raging vengeance, and sadly, you come to the stark realization that one good night isn't quite enough to repair the rift between them. You may have won a single battle, but you're still very much at war. Sean reverts to his old ways, insisting they hide the secret, and so Daniel does the same, breaking into Meryl's living room where Big Joe catches him. Meryl refuses to pay the entire group of drifters as punishment and fires the brothers, instructing Big Joe to teach Daniel a lesson. Sean seems to feel it as much as his brother does. Perhaps something in the air of the previous night did linger, much as the weight on the table begins to float through the air before it connects to its fated target, Big Joe's thick skull. Wham! Someone has to take the fall for that insufferable child yet again. And if not Sean, who else? Daniel must always remain innocent, so every time something goes wrong, Sean takes the fall. It's an uncomfortable duty he's accepted as a surrogate parent, as an older brother, and suddenly it's too late to turn back. You're not Max Caulfield. You can't rewind time, much as you wish you could. It's Daniel's power, not yours. The more you stubbornly cling to him, the less you have. Finn even said so, a phrase that now echoes in your head like a haunting mantra, adding fuel to the fire. Everyone bore witness to everything, and for better or worse, he must live with those consequences. The storm has reached the point of insanity, the point of no return. Sean has existed in yet another society and failed to follow its rules again, and so in going his own way, the way of the Wolf Brothers, he must bear the full weight of his choices. As the drifters are let in on the Wolf Brothers' secret, everyone reacts to it in their own way, much like a group of jurors. But the jury in this case is much kinder, because even though they form their own society and lay out their rules for them, they still exist apart from civilized society as outcasts. Cassidy is the first to say words of encouragement. This stays right with us. Jacob, however, is the one exception. He might live apart from society too, but unlike Sean and Daniel, a part of him regrets leaving his religious community behind, because despite the pain and trauma it caused him, he still found a lot of value in his faith, and he's still trying to reconcile that with the reality of who he is. The fact his sister is still trapped in it plays into his regret as well, but now he has reason to believe, which comes in the form of Daniel. He walks away, visibly shaken. Some of this can also be said of Sean and the way he must reconcile societal behavior with brotherhood rules too, and those can lead to a great many regrets when things go wrong. He never intended to upend Daniel's life after all, given everything. But that's what happened, and he can only live in it. And he, too, has always been shaken by Daniel's power, though he'll never admit to it. Everything he has done is to keep Daniel safe, but is clearly not working out for the best. Up until now, I put off the topic of toxic brotherhood, but it does need to be addressed in this episode. Part of Sean's reasoning for running is that he didn't want to be separated from Daniel. Though his intentions were certainly pure and he obviously had no choice in the matter, the act of running in itself forced Daniel to be completely dependent on him for virtually every aspect of his life. Food, clothing, shelter, socialization, learning right from wrong, and overall survival. But by the same measure, Sean was also forced into a role in which he would be emotionally dependent on Daniel, serving as his protector and guide, brother and father figure, and ultimately taking great satisfaction in it. That kind of empathy is a noble human impulse, but under the right kind of conditions, namely isolation and codependency, it can easily devolve into a toxic relationship. Consider that for months, the brothers lived alone in the wilderness, with no one to rely on but each other. And because they were constantly on the run from the cops, they had to form their own rules in order to remain safe. Hide your power, never talk about it, run from danger. These laws were always intended to provide a measure of security, but in hindsight, all it's doing is destroying Sean and Daniel's relationship as brothers. Many romantic relationships with these elements tend to play out in the same way, with the clingy partner exercising too much control over the other's actions and getting upset at every perceived slight. But because Sean and Daniel are family, it's easier to turn a blind eye to those elements. They are, nevertheless, significant. You can even see it at the beginning of the episode. Sean can only handle being apart from Daniel for so long, because that sense of responsibility, that commitment, that intense love he feels as an older brother, it eats away at him and compels him to constantly make sure Daniel is okay. That also brings me to my next point of toxicity, that Daniel himself even expresses at several points. It's fine for Sean to run off and hang with other drifters as much as he wants, but when Daniel does the same with Finn, Sean berates him for it, and during the training session, you have the option of outright telling him that Finn is a bad influence. The other area of similar conflict is Puerto Lobos, as it becomes clear Daniel doesn't want to go, or at the very least has valid reservations about it. But Sean shuts him down and invalidates his concerns, insisting he knows best. Then there's also their mother, whom Daniel wants to try to reach out to for help, but Sean shuts this down too. So none of Sean's actions in these examples are psychologically healthy behavior, even if he means well, and this goes back to a prior point I made in episode 2 as well. If Sean truly wants to connect and bond with Daniel in a healthy manner, he has to allow him some degree of freedom, because Daniel's powers are an immutable part of his nature. They're what makes Daniel, Daniel. So the more you attempt to restrict him, the more the cord is wound tighter, and the more he'll lash out. And let's not forget, this is the exact same familial dynamic that played out with their mother Karen and her parents as well. When the toxicity reaches that tipping point, it becomes hard for the affected party to express their desire for freedom, because they feel chained. Every time the clingy party is met with rebellion or protest, it feels like a personal attack. So in many cases, the affected party will either rebel, shut down completely, or cut all contact and go their own way. And what's to stop someone like Daniel from doing just that, like his mother did? After all, his life has already been destroyed beyond repair, and in episode 2, he even blames Sean for it, saying, "Why do you always force us to run?" As a child, Daniel deserves better, and he's finally learning that as he grows and begins to think about what would be best for him. He's learning that the company of outsiders is less restrictive and less damaging to his well-being than Sean. Finn allows him to be his own person. Daniel knows he deserves a comfortable home life in which all of his needs are met. None of those are things that Sean has been able to provide for him. Even if it's not technically Sean's fault, Finn seems to care more about his emotional need for friendship and helping him attain security. So why not run off with Finn and do it himself? And that's exactly what he does. But this isn't to justify what Finn did either. For one, there's a clear power imbalance between him and Daniel, who is of impressionable age, and it's hard to gauge his intentions. Second, even though Finn cares deeply about Daniel and Sean having a good life, he wants to get them there with no consideration of the consequences. And despite the Drifters having their own form of society, ultimately, they're still subject to following Meryl's rules, so this is where the game gets a little meta in that respect. Sean wanders off with Cassidy. When they return, they discover Finn has run off with Daniel, unless he agreed to the heist. Either way, Daniel is in for it, and Sean once again has to come save the day. I should emphasize that despite Sean's unintentional toxicity and the fact he's living apart from society with the Drifters, saving Daniel in this case is not a toxic brotherhood, rules-based, us against the world type of choice. Rather, it's a clearly defined human morality that most people of conscience would advocate for, because the highest level of society portrayed in this level, Meryl's version, is corrupt and dangerous, and this scenario plays out again in the next episode. A variety of things can happen as you make your way to Meryl's, which change a lot of the details, but ultimately the same thing happens. Meryl finds you attempting to steal money from his safe and orders the group of would-be thieves to their knees. As the tension escalates, Daniel unleashes his power and lays waste to the cabin, wounding Sean in the process and knocking out everyone else. It's fascinating to me throughout the course of Life is Strange 2 how every single authority figure the boys encounter, each with varying degrees of bias, racism, or ill intention, is challenged in some way. It perfectly illustrates the point that the Diaz brothers are never permitted any form of justice, because in truth, they were never viewed as being a valid part of society by anyone, and the justice system has always been corrupt. People of color often have to work twice as hard to attain the same status and recognition as white people within the same societal framework, and oftentimes they can only do so with help, which also makes Karen's abandonment of the family even worse for her sons. Had Karen been there when Esteban died, her half-Mexican, non-white passing children would be able to rely on her to advocate for their version of the truth and swing a verdict in their favor. After all, when white people use their privilege positively to stand up for disenfranchised people of color, things tend to turn out much better for them as the institutions of systemic racism can no longer enact corrupt forms of justice. However, she does use her privilege for good in the final episode, and I also have to give Claire credit in episode 2 for doing the same. And that concludes part 3 of our video essay on Life is Strange 2. I will try and put out the 4th part as soon as I possibly can, because I know the wait for this one has been ridiculous, but, you know, life happens. But anyway, I hope you stick around. Thank you for listening up to this point, and I will see you in the next episode.